Welcome. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's wonderful to have such a great turnout. This is the 7th year of Meredith's Emerging Artist in Residency program. It's kind of amazing that we've done 7 years of this. The Emerging Artist in Residency invites Meredith Art Department grads to apply to come back. It is a competitive program. We do it once a semester. And those students apply with a portfolio showing proficiency in a specific medium. And then they come and they get some skills, some teaching assistant skills, while also building a portfolio that they can use to apply to grad school or launch their professional career. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship between the art department. The students that we currently have here learn from these residents as well. And then we hope that the residents are also learning valuable career skills. And we have 3 amazing residents that were with us last fall semester who are here to share their work tonight. So thank you all very much for being here. Handing it off to my colleague, Todd.
Hello, everyone. My name is Todd Jones. I'm the gallery director here at Meredith College. It's my pleasure to work with these students throughout their time of their A.I.R residency and being sending in critiques and having individual studio visits with them. We're very proud of them and what they've accomplished. So one thing I would like to do is just to read through the press release, and then I will go ahead and turn it over to the artists and they will begin their talks. So Threshold speaks to the shared themes of transition, identity, and rootedness, offering visitors a chance to reflect on the many stages of growth, uncertainty, introspection, and life expression that we'll all go through in life. Through the use of experimental painting techniques, Sara Grace Lane's paintings series acts as a visual diary documenting the disillusionment and romanticization that many people experience in their 20s. Blending sculptural processes such as ceramics and welding with fibers, Kasey Vandenboom explores the destruction and reinvention of identity, highlighting how different versions of identity coexist and contradict one another. Marty Rogers uses fibers, found objects, and personal objects to document and persevere both collective and personal memories, weaving a nostalgic web of vulnerable and reflective work. Through their distinct yet overlapping perspectives, Sara Grace, Kasey, and Marty invite viewers to consider what it means to stand at the precipice of change, to confront both anxiety and joy, and embrace the change and the unknown. Thank you so much, and let me welcome the artists to begin their artist talks. First up is Sara Grace Lane.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sara Grace Lane. I did my residency in painting. I just recently graduated in May of 2024. So in my very limited experience being in the real world, I've been focusing on building up my small business and selling landscapes and doing a lot of commissions. Oh, here's my title slide. So I decided to join in the residency pretty soon after graduation because I completed this series of work in my final semester during my senior year, and I wanted to continue working on this approach in my residency. So I started out by using this watercolor approach and combining it with my oil. So I have a huge passion for oil painting. That's definitely my thing. That's what I stick with. But I love how watercolor combines this memory-like effect and this dreamy quality. And I wanted to figure out how to unify those together. So I developed this series. This was called the Study Abroad series, and it was about my time in Italy, studying abroad with Meredith. So coming into this residency, I wanted to, of course, continue with this technique and develop it more. But I also had a concept in mind. So my concept is pretty simple. I wanted to talk about the authentic experience of being in your 20s and particularly in your early 20s. I'm almost out of the early 20s. But I feel like this is what I could relate to most. And I think being in your early 20s has the most kind of emotionally taxing experience because you are leaving childhood, you're much more responsible for yourself. And I kind of wanted to contrast the reality of being in your 20s versus the very like over romanticized version that we see in movies and books and TV shows. So I decided to portray something that felt a lot more relatable and kind of use these very candid moments in time as my subject matter. And coming off of that idea of looking at movies and books and shows, I wanted to incorporate words somehow. So I originally thought about using words kind of like as captions or subtitles directly on my pieces. And I even thought about putting like my own movie titles on the pieces, and creating a movie title that was a little bit more, I guess, authentic of what the experience would be like. I decided to take a little bit of a different approach. I might return to this in the future because I think it is something I'm still passionate about. But I decided to take a softer approach with the words, and I ended up blending them into the pieces a lot more and kind of having them reveal themselves underneath the subjects. And I still leaned into that memory aspect and that dreamy storytelling quality in these pieces, as I did in my study abroad series. So collaboration was a huge part of this project. I knew that I did not want to just use my own experience. Honestly, I thought I would get kind of bored just talking about myself the whole time. And I thought it would be a lot more relatable if I tied in other people's experiences and kind of create this empathy between people when we have so many different circumstances that we face in our 20s. But I think that our emotions are all very similar. So I created a questionnaire and I shared it on Instagram, and I had no idea who was going to answer it. And I made it a little bit intense. I definitely, after I showed people, they were like, yeah, you need to chill out a little bit. So I kind of went back in there and I simplified it quite a bit. So yeah, I just shared it and I was asking people about their favorite memories and things that they would kind of go back and tell themselves if they were just entering in their 20s. And I got some really valuable feedback. I got people that really sat down with it. And I mean, they wrote like paragraphs, which was so helpful. And I used it to form these pieces throughout the whole time. And I also asked for images. So I had over 50 images and I used them as my subject matter. And kind of a little personal note, it was really special. I got to go and kind of raid my mom's sorority sister's storage unit, and I found all of her old college pictures. So I have a lot of images in here of my mom and dad in college, which was really special. So I did a lot of research throughout my residency, trying to figure out what techniques I even wanted to try. So I have three artists that kind of stood out to me. Nick Runge was the first one. You can probably see some similarities in his work and my work. I was really inspired by the way that he pulled features in these faces out of what look like just blobs of color. So for lack of a better word of explaining it, I think that he pulled out detail out of blobs really well. So he had a combination of both of the detail and abstraction. And I think kind of a constant battle that I have with myself the whole time. I think my mentor can attest to this. I really wanted to focus on detail and put in a lot of detail. I do a lot of commissions and portraits, so that's kind of what I do in my commissions is I have an image and I sit down and do that image. And for this, it was much more process oriented. So I was kind of letting it develop over time. So Sarah McCrae Morton, she develops these very fantastical scenes that feel very dreamy and otherworldly, which I was so inspired by. And I love her lack of detail. I feel like she gives just enough detail where you know exactly what you're looking at, but there's really no facial features that you see. And I love the blurred dreamlike quality that she also has. Jonathan Todrick was the last artist I was going to mention. His works are pretty simple. They're basically just pigment on canvas. But I think that he carries so much vibrancy and emotion in his pieces that I really wanted to incorporate into my background specifically. So my backgrounds are pretty abstract. I just kind of poured acrylic paint, and then I brought in the forms after I created these very abstract pieces. So I was super inspired by the emotions that he conveys in just these very simple works. And this is just a small list of the things that I tried. I definitely became friends with the people at Jerry's Artorama because I was going there a lot. And then after a while, they kind of pulled me aside and they were like, "What are you doing? What are you working on?" So that was really fun. But yeah, I tried a lot of different things. I even incorporated some pastels and charcoal. I incorporated screen printing, a lot of different things. I used images. I did like gel transfers with images. So this was a very small list of all the things that I tried. And then my final results, I ended up sticking with the unprimed raw canvas, which that's what I did in my study abroad series. I kind of deterred from that just to explore if there's anything that could give me a better result that I was looking for. But honestly, just the raw canvas with just acrylic paints and water, they gave me exactly what I was looking for. So I stuck with that, and I used a lot of salt for texture. So when you look at my pieces, you'll probably see some pockets that kind of repel the pigment. And I used salt and alcohol in those areas. One thing that was hard was I created the acrylic backgrounds without any idea of what the subject was going to look like. So once I created the backgrounds and let them dry, I approached them again a few days later, and I tried to pull out the subjects from the shapes that were created just naturally. And then I pulled the words. So back in the questionnaire, I pulled a lot of the words and phrases that I saw in that. And I wrote them on there kind of as a nod to the visual diary aspect. And one fun thing was I asked people what a movie was or a TV show or book that kind of represented their 20s experience. And then I pulled quotes from those and put them in there. So if you take time and kind of read through, you'll probably see some pretty famous quotes from movies about coming of age. And then I used a clear leveling gel as a primer, and then I painted oils very sparingly on top of that to give me my subjects. That's all I have. Thank you, guys.
Right. A lot of people here. It's a little different than talking to kids. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kasey Vandenboom. I graduated from Meredith in the spring of 2022, and I returned for the fall 2024 semester to pursue my artist in residence for sculpture with Holly Fisher. And I am an art teacher, so this was done primarily outside of my regular working hours. And I'm really excited to show you what I've come up with. So when you step into my space, you'll notice that there is a couple of different sculptures as well as a one wall work. I really wanted my stuff to be a further exploration of some work that I did in my undergrad experience. When I was in undergrad, I did several pieces with fibers that blended with ceramics and how the relationship between hard and soft could create a really interesting balance and dynamic. So that was my main goal. And I also knew that I really wanted to work with negative space. So you'll notice that all of my pieces have some sort of negative space all throughout them. Most of my themes center around identity and vulnerability, because those are two very big things for me as an artist as well as a person. And then how it is to build identities, specifically as a young 20-year-old artist who's fresh out of school and just started, I'm in my third year teaching now, and what it means to kind of forget different versions of yourself as you move through life, and explore what those reinventions of self mean to you. So it's an exploration of how identity shifts and shapes throughout life. There you will notice there is a contrast between hard and soft, just like what I was talking about with that ceramic and fibers. I also have a welded piece, which I'll show you some detail shots of in a minute here. I think there's a really interesting connection between things that are fragile versus things that are strong, as well as the overlap between the two. Ceramics are very, very strong, sturdy things, but they're also very, very fragile if you drop them. Same for things like weaving and fibers. Things that are made out of cloth are very, very strong, but they look really delicate. So you'll see that there's a lot of relationship between those two. So starting with my first piece that I made, I tackled my hardest one first, which was a choice. But my first one is titled Vacancies, and it is kind of about what is left behind when you start cutting away different parts of yourself that maybe don't define you anymore, but used to hold a really important space for you. So the entire thing has big cutouts. And those represent different vacancies in identity that you're waiting to fill and sort of reinvent as you move through life. Knotted in the middle are strands of string that are then beaded. I knew I wanted to hang something in the center because I had so much open space and light play happening, and I wanted to really draw the viewer into this very precarious space that honestly makes me a little anxious to look at because it almost looks like it's going to fall apart. So in the middle, you'll notice there is a bunch of beaded strands that are in the lid structure, and they are hanging in one giant knot, kind of to represent the idea of like knotted feelings in your stomach when you're anxious, but also to represent the glimmers of hope that come with reinvention and discovering new things about yourself. Here's some detail shots of that knot. If you ask me very nicely later, I will let you touch it. It is really fun to touch. And for the process of these, for my people who are not familiar with ceramics, I used coiling to build almost pretty much all of them with the exception of my welded piece. All of the ceramics are hollow on the inside, and coiling is a process that involves rolling out clay into long snakes and then attaching and stacking them into the shape that they are in. Once I had that finished, I decided to then start cutting in the holes, and I fell in love with the way that the light plays through the back so you can see through to the other side. And this is my finished one at the very end before it got fired. Loading it in the kiln made me very anxious. Thank you, Holly, for your help. So the second one is a direct kind of foil of that first one. It is titled Undress, and it is about texture and depicting the uncomfortable anxieties that come with change, but also the idea of there's different versions of yourself that you present to others. We all wear different masks in front of others, so the entire piece is completely textured, but it is wrapped in a very sheer fabric that is then draped over the pedestal. So the whole thing has different parts that you can see. Some parts are almost completely exposed. That represents what it means to show people yourself entirely and having them accept it. While other parts are a little bit more veiled where you can almost see what's through to the underneath. So it's like different levels of sharing with people. And then some are almost completely covered because the fabric is twisted and knotted so much that you can't see through it. This is about having agency over who you share yourself with and how much you share with those. This one is my welded piece. So while I was working with ceramics, I also realized I really wanted to explore new media. And during my residency, I got to help out with the sculpture class, which was in the evenings, which was perfect for my schedule because I was teaching full time. So I would go to my day job and then I would go to Meredith almost directly after. And one of their projects was to create a welded armature that they would then weave on to create a sort of skin. So it was like a skeleton in skin project. I really wanted to do this because when I took sculpture, I did not get the opportunity to do welding due to COVID restrictions. So I really took it upon myself to be like, can I do it too? And Holly said yes. So part of my residency was also helping people outside of their normal class time hours with like troubleshooting welding and figuring out different things with the welder because we had a few problems over the semester. So in here, you'll notice that there's a bunch of different texture. I did not buy any fibers for this aside from the beads. So all of it is reused from past projects. I really like thrifting. So some of them are different thrifted fabrics, including things like tablecloths, pillowcases. I had extra roving wool, which is the chunkier pieces of fabric in there. And you'll also notice that there is pieces of Marty's and Sara Grace's projects in there as well. So you'll notice there's some canvas scraps and some fabric scraps in there. I also had a few other items, like just random fabrics that were laying around, as well as old love letters that no longer have purpose to me. So I put them all in there as a way to commemorate memory. And the things that we choose to keep and the things that we choose to maybe leave behind and as part of our past versions. This one also includes the negative spaces. So parts are completely exposed warps. Those are your vertical lines that are going through. And then at the bottom, there are beads just kind of dangling down to prove that we like leave things behind as we age. And then there's also sheer panels, which are a little bit hard to see in the photo. Up front, you can see them, which is like different things that fade as you move through life. My last big ceramic piece was called Comfortably at Odds. So each one is a different side. You'll have to move completely around the piece to get the full version. But this one explores the idea of duality within the self. We each have different parts of ourself that contradict, but also coexist within each other. So each weaving on each side represents a different version of myself, one being a little bit more bold and sparkly and pizzazzy, which I feel like is more authentic to me. The opposite side is a little bit more delicate. It's a softer color palette. And that represents like the watered down, more delicate, easy to please kind of version of me that I feel other people want me to be. However, I still find identity in both of these things. I feel like I wear different masks depending on where I am. I'm a different version of me at school. I'm a different version of me at home. So there is a ceramic piece in the center. If you get really up close, you can see through to the other side. And that represents that while these two things are contradicting and contrasting each other, there's still a good amount of overlap because I kind of exist in the spaces between. There's also a strong emphasis on gender expression and sexuality. Here's the process for this one as well. This one was the most fun to make. It gave me the least problems. This one is also coiled, so you'll see at the bottom, I'm starting to build up those two arms that then meet at the top. And then those long tendrils are also hollow and connected to the space on the inside. Once I got it to that point, I wanted to add my directional lines to give it some movement so people would physically walk around the piece and want to see both sides, which is ideally how I want people to view me. I want them to be interested enough to look at all the other pieces that maybe you don't notice at a glance. And then the weavings are in the center. And on that very left side, you'll notice I have my unwoven piece. This was a pain to weave, but I do like to show that you can see through to the other side when it's not completely woven. And I'm happy to answer any questions. These are all of my outtakes for things that I didn't have room for. So that's me welding. It was very fun. But I'm happy to take any questions later. Thank you. Marty is next.
Hi, y'all. I'm Marty Rogers. I'm the Fibers Artist in Residence this past fall. So before we start, I want to just take a second to take a breath instead of just rushing into this. So if you want to take a breath, take a second. I need a second. Okay, so before I get into it, I wanted to say that a lot of this is going to be just like context around my art, kind of like in a little expansion pack to Marty's art that's out there in the hall. And I'll also talk about process. And I wanted to take a second and dedicate this to my late grandpa, aka Papa, who my biggest inspiration. Okay, so context. I graduated from Meredith in 2018 with an art education degree. I went to New Mexico for an internship, and I went into teaching, where I was there kind of on and off for around 4.5 years. But before that, I was a kid. So I was born in Moore County, about an hour south of here, and I grew up across the street from a tobacco field and a couple of trailers. I had a very colorful, varied, wild childhood, to say the least. And all of my art somehow always comes back to my childhood and where I'm from and the things that I've experienced and the people that I know. So some inspiration that I've pulled here are all in some way rooted to that context that I just gave, whether it's the dated family photos or little ribbons, bunnies, hanging out with grandparents, all those nice, sweet, soft things, and also like broken glass and rusty old trucks. I'm gonna also share about my process. I figured I'd start us off with the most concrete example of my process so I don't lose everybody with the abstract stuff up front. So these photos are not part of my fibers practice per se, but I wanted to pull them as an example of this past summer, literally like the week before I got into the residency. I was at Penland for a letterpress workshop. So on the left is the Tow River, the middle is me working on the project, and then on the right is the end product. And the process for me was being in the studio, being so frustrated because I'd already gone about and done all the little fun warm-up activities and whatever. And I felt like, okay, what am I going to do for this booklet? Like, I don't know. So I just got so frustrated. I was like, screw this. I'm going to the river. I can't be in the studio any longer because nothing is happening. And as soon as I went to the river, that's like when it happened. Just sitting out there in the sun and thinking like, I don't know what I'm doing in the studio. I was like, wait, this is what I'm doing. And that's how I got the gears turning and ended up making the booklet about being in the river. Here's an example, getting a little bit more into the abstract. Here's an example of my process actually being the product, the thing that I make at the end. So on the left is a panel of raw silk that I fermented using the prickly pear fruit that's actually from that big mother plant that lives out front of this building. And on the fabric itself are two printed out pieces of fabric. One of them is a screenshot from the video that I took here of me harvesting the fruit. And then to the right is a progress photo I took during that process. So it's kind of this ethereal loop of what's influencing what's the process, what's the product. So when I first got here, I sort of knew what I wanted to be doing, mostly experimenting. I knew that I wanted to come out with a body of work, but I didn't have that really defined. So I got here and I got to work fermenting things, sticking things into jars, boiling things, leaving rusty things in the sun with vinegar and fabric in it just to see what happened. I'm gonna take a second to find myself on my notes because I'm a little bit off the path here. Okay, so part of my process also with experimentation is question asking. So what's going to happen if I put this and this together? Am I going to get a chemical burn? Is there something safety-wise that I need to be considering? Am I wasting my time? Should I be doing something different? And sometimes those questions lead me to really beautiful places. Like on the left, that's a picture of the cyanotype, which is basically magic, where you lay an object down on top of a treated surface, and then it takes this beautiful cameraless photograph using the power of the sun, basically. So yeah, sometimes it leads me to great ends. Sometimes it's just frustrating. And on the right there, is a picture that Sara Grace took of me. I think pretty early on, I was like, hey, can you come out here with me laying on the ground and help me capture this? So the documentation has been incredibly important to me throughout this whole process. Coming back to, I'll explain. Coming back to the idea of asking questions is there are times, like I said, that I end up with something beautiful and I'm like, yay, this led me to something that I can show people. Other times I'm just kind of like, what? Like, I don't know. Like, because I like doing cyanotypes, should I be doing that? Or should I be doing this? Well, I'm a writer, but how can I be a writer if I'm an artist? I don't like this back and forth of these contradictions. And also just with myself, my personality, my gender expression, everything, I feel like there are these binaries that are at odds. And I found a way to work through that is through play. So all of the things that are up here are the products of me. I'll use nice language because my grandma is here, messing around, just seeing what happens. What happens if I take magnolia petals from the backyard and I embroider them and then I let it decay? Can I weave this pine straw together while my sibling works on a paper? Like, what happens if I put lace on this paper? I wonder if I can make an installation with pine straw. Can you pass me that water, Kasey? My grandma is like, take this water bottle. Right. Thank you again. So just important as play is hard work. So this was me the very first day that I moved into the studio. And then this is what it became over the course of the semester. To the untrained eye, it looks chaotic and messy. But to me, I know that, that it's exactly how it was supposed to be. And if you look closely, you can see pieces that were kind of being not even birthed. I didn't even know if I was going to use half the stuff in this photo. But to get where I am and where the things in the hall are now beautifully on display, I really had to go through the process of just like throwing things on the wall and creating that cluttered little pack rat space. Now that I'm not at Meredith, I've had to be intentional about how I'm continuing having a studio. I don't have a studio now, but I do have my little space at our house. Taking classes, just really working to keep up my creative practice and my creative health in that way. Another thing that I've done while I was here and also since then is taking part in art that has nothing to do with me. Some of this up there are things that I did kind of auxiliary to what I was doing here, like doing a workshop at Lump, or Stacey Kirby's Artist Collective had me as a guest. But then the other things are like, I just went to see a thing at Lump that my friend was doing. I threw a party with my friend. I stumbled upon an art gallery. And all these little bits and pieces are so integral to making this final body of work that's ongoing. So I wanted to close with some little words of wisdom, I suppose. I asked myself what I wanted to see in an artist talk whenever I go to hear people talking. So let's find where that is on my paper. I'm not going to wing it. I'm just going to read it off of here. So my wisdom to budding creatives, established creatives, literally any and everyone in here. Be a forever student, seek wisdom, take tough advice, investigate what you want from your practice, and whether or not you actually want to make money off of your art. That's a tough subject. Play, live a full life. You can't really create based on just sitting in a bubble, consuming. You have to live life, be messy, have experiences. Be open to failure. It took me 3 times to get accepted into the A.I.R program, and I'm so glad that it did because I thought I was ready the first 2 times, but it was the 3rd time that really was the charm, I suppose. Surround yourself with beauty and always seek it. But my biggest wisdom is not my own words. It's those of Mary Oliver. Something like, you only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. And for me, that's being in the river with my friends. And yeah, so I just want to encourage you all to chase that as well in your lives, whether you're an artist or not at all. And then to really close, I want to say thank you to all the people who got me here that I'm not going to look at because then I will cry. Yeah, my family that I married into, family I kind of talked to, my parents, my Grammy, my partner, Tommy, my best friends, my mom, my papa and Carol, and that banging photo, the coolest picture ever down at the bottom. If you have questions, I will not answer them here. I will answer them in the hall. And if you want to take a picture, don't count on that QR code working. I don't trust the scale to which it's been blown up to, but take a picture if you feel like getting in touch with me at a time that's not now. And I'll go back to the penny one. Thank you.